Welcome to the Pelican Brief with your host, David Tapman.
Welcome to the Pelican Brief. I am your host, David Tapman. Now that the session's over, we're having to pivot a little bit. But in an effort to share with our listeners what we know, we wanted to provide you with a few updates. As you may remember, the session ended with a bang. The budget was passed in the final moments of the legislative session, and there was not enough time to really review and get down into the details of the budget documents. There were a lot of hostilities on the House floor, especially in the legislature broadly, and a great deal of media attention focused on the process and how the session ended. In fact, there are a number of legislators that have vowed to change the budget process so that something like this doesn't happen again. I can tell you with 34 years of experience in the legislative process, it is not the first time that has happened. So we'll move forward. One of the biggest topics of discussion was the $100 million cut to the Department of Health and Hospitals. Those cuts were going to hit mental health and behavioral health, as well as nursing homes, the hardest. There was also a big economic development project in there, which was a shipping container terminal in St. Bernard Parish. So the governor vowed from the very beginning that he was going to find a way to restore all of those unpopular spending cuts that were approved by lawmakers, including the $100 million reduction to the Department of Health. How did he do this? Well, the details are a little fuzzy, but the governor has said that he has been able to restore those cuts through a process known as line item veto. The governor has authority to veto specific lines of spending bills without vetoing the entire bill. This was something that was actually implemented back in Governor Mike Foster's administration. So how he did it, we don't know exactly, but he has said that he has vetoed other parts of the spending bills in order to restore those cuts. So we shall see how that goes. I want to talk a little bit more about the veto front, let's call it that. The governor announced that he vetoed several other bills, and I'm going to go through a couple of those, but remember, I can't go through every one, just going to hit the highlights. Senate Bill 1 by Senator Brett Alon, chairman of the Senate Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Committee, and Stuart Bishop, chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, had Senate Bill 1, which would have phased out corporate franchise tax over time. This is something that economic development professionals say would go a long way toward making Louisiana more attractive to businesses and economic development. That bill was vetoed. Governor Edwards also vetoed a couple of other bills, one of which was House Bill 399 by Representative Kathy Edmonston and Senator Kurt Talbot, which would have provided additional information relative to vaccine requirements for students and their families. Governor Edwards vetoed House Bill 205 by Representative Marcus Bryant and Senator Gerald Boudreaux, which would have provided additional compensation for teachers and other school employees. Probably a little more controversial from a veto standpoint is Governor Edwards vetoed House Bill 85 by Representative Mike Johnson and Senator Louis Bernard. This bill would have established a 25-foot safety zone for police who have ordered onlookers to stand back while they are conducting law enforcement activities and conducting investigations. This is a bill that was widely touted as giving police officers and law enforcement officials the ability to secure a crime scene, the ability to preserve evidence, and things of that sort. Of course, on the other side, you had people that said this was a violation of people's constitutional right. And I think primarily it seems to be about people videotaping police activities. Whatever it was, the governor vetoed it. And so this is a bill that Representative Johnson said he would bring back next year and hopefully have a governor who would be willing to sign it. There are a couple of other bills that are very likely to be the trigger of a veto override session. And let me go through the bills first and then explain veto override session for our listeners who may not understand that. So we talked a lot throughout the session about one of the big social issues on the table. There was a bill that finally passed by, was House Bill 648, by the way, by Representative Gabe Ferment of Pollock, Louisiana. The bill would have provided a ban on gender-affirming care for minors. The legislation was actually originally defeated in the Senate Health and Welfare Committee, but the bill was resurrected through a procedural process that recommitted the bill to a different committee dealing with the civil aspects of the legislation. The bill passed that committee, Senate Judiciary A Committee, unanimously, because some of the opponents didn't show up for it, and then passed both the House and Senate and was vetoed by the governor. This bill is likely, if there is a veto override session, this bill will likely be the trigger of that. And the reason primarily is because almost every other state has some bill dealing with gender-affirming care bans for minors, only minors. There is another bill that probably wouldn't be as much of a trigger, but it was vetoed by the governor, House Bill 466 by Representative Dodie Horton. It was a bill that banned discussion of gender and sexual identity in K-12 classrooms. The governor also vetoed that bill. So let's talk a little bit about the background on gubernatorial action when legislation is provided. So the governor can sign a bill, veto a bill, or allow it to become law without action. There are time frames in which the governor is required to act. When the governor receives a bill that is enrolled, which means it has passed both houses of the legislature and been signed by both of the presiding officers, so that would be the President of the Senate, Speaker of the House, it is called what we refer to as enrolled. The governor then has timeframes in which he must act, or the legislation becomes law without action. The timeframes kind of go like this. He has 10 days to act on a bill once he receives it, if that legislation was received while the legislature was in session. If the bill is received after the legislature has adjourned sine die, he has additional time. He has 20 days to act. So what does that mean? Usually at the end of the session, there are a lot of bills that are sent to his desk. So the Constitution provides a little bit more time for him to act. So there is potential for a veto override session. How does that work? The Louisiana Constitution, Article 3, Section 18, states that the legislature shall meet in a veto session at the state capitol at noon on the 40th day following final adjournment of the most recent legislative session to consider bills vetoed by the governor. If the 40th day falls on a Sunday, then the session shall convene at noon on the succeeding Monday. No veto session shall exceed 5 calendar days, according to the Constitution. In order to override a veto, a bill must get a 2/3 vote of the elected member of both the House and the Senate. Another interesting part that people may not be aware of is that the veto session is actually automatic unless a majority of either house declares in writing that a veto session is unnecessary. So every legislator has the opportunity to send in a ballot to say to the presiding officers that I do not believe that a veto session is necessary. If they don't act, if they don't send anything in, then they are in essence voting for, in their silence, a veto override session. So this would happen sometime in mid-July, and I can just tell you conventional wisdom right now is that there will be a veto override session. We'll see. I'm not always right. I just tell you what I hear. I think that the likelihood of having another special session on redistricting is highly unlikely. It could happen, but at this point, the congressional districts, or everybody's going to run in the current congressional districts, this would not take effect until the next term. There was a case, a Supreme Court case that came down dealing with the Alabama redistricting process, and that has caused many of the redistricting cases to sort of be reevaluated. And so we'll see how that impacts the Louisiana Legislature and the Louisiana congressional districts. There is a possibility that there will be a second black congressional district in Louisiana. And the question is, will the judge redraw those lines, or will the legislature redraw those lines? A lot remains to be seen. So that's kind of where we are right now. That's the state of things. We'll continue to report on it as we move forward. I want to go in a little bit different direction now and talk a little bit about a bill that was defeated during the regular session of the Louisiana Legislature, dealing with the elimination of the death penalty in the state of Louisiana. So that bill was defeated. Since that bill was defeated, many of the individuals on death row, the vast majority, have applied for clemency. And the hope is that they can get a recommendation from the Pardons and Paroles Board for their sentences to be commuted to life imprisonment, and then that to be forwarded to the governor, and that the governor would follow suit. Louisiana is a little bit different. There are a couple of other states where when a governor was going out of office, they commuted all of the death penalty sentences to life in prison. Louisiana is a little different. You have to have approval, a recommendation from the Board of Pardons and Paroles, and then the governor can act. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but because of that, we are going to cover some material that may be of interest to you. So the Pelican Brief is a production of Off Script Productions. It is a production company that I own with two close friends. We do video, we do movies, we do podcasts, we do all kinds of things. So we have the Pelican Brief is one of our products, one of our lines, if you will. We have another one called Critical Condition, America at a Crossroads. It is a podcast that we started about the same time we started the Pelican Brief. Its initial focus was crime in America, crime across America. We had some really interesting guests. We had some people from California on our show. We had some crime victims' rights advocates from the Illinois area, and a number of other episodes. So one of the things we're going to do on that podcast, if you're interested, is we're going to begin to profile some of the individuals that are on death row in Louisiana. And we're going to start with Antoinette Frank. So if you're my age and you lived in South Louisiana, you probably remember that name. Antoinette Frank was a New Orleans police officer who was involved in an armed robbery and murder of 3 individuals, including a fellow New Orleans police officer. And so we're going to tell that story because I think it's interesting, and I have to tell you in my research on that for Critical Condition that I learned a lot more than I knew before. So we're going to do that. And then if we get to a point where the governor and the pardon board does begin to commute some sentences, we're going to cover the cases of the sentences that they commuted. And so we'll see how that goes, but I'm going to put some links in there if you want to check out Critical Condition. You can subscribe, and then when that show comes out, you can take a look at it if you like. So if you want to hear my voice some more. So now that session's over, we're going to maybe have a veto session. We'll see. But remember that you can go back and watch all of the action through the archive videos through the state legislative website. You know, I've talked about it before. It is www.legis.la.gov. It's a fantastic resource. If you can't find it, just Google Louisiana Legislature. It's going to bring you to it, and you can go look at archive videos and look at any of these bills in the debate. We are the Pelican Brief. You can follow us on social media. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Our social media handle on all of the social media platforms is at Pelican Brief 225. That's at Pelican Brief 225. You can also watch us on YouTube. If my voice is not bad enough, you get to look at my ugly mug. But we do the video version because we sometimes have guests, and we like to put their face in front of you, and it's just for consistency, we video all of them. And if you go to YouTube, you can go to at the Pelican Brief 225. It's just one continuous word, at the Pelican Brief 225. You can listen to our programs on all of your favorite podcasting platforms: Spotify, Amazon, Apple, all of them. So please like, subscribe, and share. You listeners who have been here a little while, you know the rules. If you have a good take, I'm going to mention you on the show. If you want to be mentioned on the show, if you have a great take, we'll have you on, and you can be a guest and come talk to us. So if you have any issues you think we should dig deeper into, let us know. You can post to our feeds. You can email us. Our email address is thepelicanbrief225@gmail.com. That's thepelicanbrief225@gmail.com. Until next time, we are the Pelican Brief.
The Pelican Brief is an off-script production.